He came in at 8:15, exactly as promised. Maya had told herself, twice while making coffee, and once while wiping down the counter, that she was not watching the door. She was wrong on all three counts. The bell above the entrance rang, and she felt it before she heard it. That particular shift in the air that Luca Ferrante had apparently decided was his personal calling card. He sat at the corner table. Of course he did. Gary had been briefed, not fully, because there was no version of the full story that Gary would receive calmly, but enough. The regular wants eggs. Real eggs. Nothing from a carton.
Can you do that?
Gary had looked at her with the mild suspicion of a man who had worked in diners for 26 years and understood that the word regular was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. But he had nodded, and this morning he had cracked 4 eggs individually into a bowl before the first customer walked in, which was, for Gary, an act of significant devotion. Maya brought the plate over herself. Gary made that, she said, setting it down. He cracked each egg individually. He wants you to know that. Luca looked at the plate, then at her. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Tell Gary I appreciate it. Tell him yourself. He appreciates directness. She turned to go. The diner was filling up, the usual Thursday crowd, slower than the week's midpoint but steady enough to keep her moving. She was at table 3 with a coffee refill when she noticed the second car. It was not the black SUV from the rival family. It was a different vehicle altogether. A dark gray sedan she recognized because it had been parked outside the diner twice this week without anyone getting out of it. It pulled into the lot now, and the man who stepped out was large, unhurried, and wearing a jacket that fit the way jackets fit on men who carry things beneath them. He walked straight to Luca's table and sat down across from him, without being invited. Maya watched from the counter. She could not hear the conversation. The diner noise swallowed it, but she did not need to hear it. She could read it. The man across from Luca was not hostile in an obvious way. He was the other kind. The carefully controlled kind, the kind that came from long practice at having difficult conversations in quiet voices in public places.
He spoke.
Luca listened. Luca's face did not change, which Maya had learned meant he was deciding something rather than receiving it. Danny appeared at her elbow. Who's that? Someone from Luca's world. He looks like someone's very polite problem. Yes, Maya said. That's exactly what he looks like. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Maya knew because she watched the clock without meaning to. When it ended, the large man stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without looking at anyone else in the diner. He got in the gray sedan and drove away. Luca sat alone at the corner table. Maya finished her round, set the coffee pot down, and walked over. She sat across from him without asking, the way she had started doing this week, without ceremony or announcement, because the permission had been established, and she was not the kind of person to keep asking for the same door to open twice. Vincent, she said. Luca looked at her. You remembered the name. I remember everything you've told me. Which isn't much, so it's easy. She folded her hands on the table. What did he want? To remind me that staying here is a choice that other people are noticing. And what did you tell him? That the decision is made. Maya looked at him steadily. He didn't look happy. No. Is he going to be a problem? Vincent is not a problem. Vincent is. Luca paused, choosing the word with the care he applied to most things. Vincent is loyal. He worries the way loyal people worry. He will adjust. Maya nodded slowly. The diner hummed around them. Gary called an order number from the kitchen window. Somewhere near the door, 2 of the retired men were already settling into their booth with the particular sigh of people who have nowhere else they'd rather be. What does staying cost you? Maya asked. Not in the abstract. Not the version you'd give someone who works for you. The real version. He was quiet for longer than she expected. Long enough that she thought he might not answer at all, that the question might be the kind he deflected the way he deflected most personal things, with a look that acknowledged the question without actually receiving it. But then he said, control. She waited. I have managed every variable in my life for a long time, he said. Every room I walk into, every decision, every outcome, I know what the margins are. I know where the edges are. I know how to stay inside them. He looked at his coffee rather than at her. Being here, being around you, I do not know the margins. I cannot calculate the outcome. That is not something I have allowed in a very long time. He paused. It cost me that. The not knowing. Maya sat with that for a moment. Then she reached over, picked up his coffee cup, and went to the counter to refill it. She brought it back, set it down in front of him, and sat again. For what it's worth, she said, I don't know the outcome either. I know, he said. Does that help? He looked at her, that long, still look she was beginning to translate. Surprisingly, he said, yes. She went back to work. But the thing that had been formless between them for a week had settled, quietly and without announcement, into something with a shape. Something she could put her hands around without it dissolving. That was enough for now. That was more than enough. If you came back for part 2, this story was made for you. Follow Stories by Niksy and never miss a chapter. Drop a black heart if Luca giving up control hit different. The school day ended at 3:20, and Maya had learned, in 7 years of motherhood, to be at the gate by 3:15. Sophia had inherited precisely nothing of her mother's patience and a great deal of her mother's opinions, and she had strong feelings about waiting. Maya was there at 3:14. Sophia came through the gate at 3:22, backpack listing sideways, hair ribbon undone, talking before she had fully cleared the crowd of other children. And then Mrs. Calloway said that wasn't the right answer, but it was the right answer, Mama. It was just the right answer that she wasn't expecting, which is different. And I told Marcus that he couldn't have my apple, but I gave it to him anyway because he forgot his lunch again, and Marcus always forgets his lunch. I think his mama needs a system. Hi, baby, Maya said, catching the backpack strap and fixing the ribbon in one practice motion. Hi. Sophia tucked her hand into Maya's without breaking stride. Can we get juice? We have juice at home. Not the good juice. The juice at home is fine. Sophia accepted this, with the diplomatic silence of someone who had not given up but was choosing their battles. They walked the 4 blocks home in the particular rhythm of after school, Sophia's voice filling the space, Maya listening with one ear and letting the rest of the day settle out of her shoulders. They turned onto their street. Sophia stopped. Mama, she said, in a completely different register. Quieter, sharper, the voice she used when she was paying very close attention. That car was here before. Maya followed her gaze to the end of the street. The black car sat at the curb precisely where it had sat on the night Maya had come home from her late shift and found headlights waiting quietly until her door closed. Same angle. Same stillness. It was, Maya said. Whose is it? Maya looked at her daughter, at the serious, bright, completely unfrightened face turned up toward hers, and decided, not for the first time, that Sophia deserved more honesty than most adults thought to give children.
Someone I know, she said.
He's making sure we're all right. Sophia considered this with the focused gravity of a 7-year-old working through a logic problem. Is he your friend? I'm still figuring that out. Sophia looked at the car one more time, then looked back at Maya. Okay, she said, with the particular confidence of someone who has gathered the information they needed, and they went inside. Maya did not expect the knock at the door 3 hours later. She was at the kitchen table helping Sophia with a worksheet about animal habitats when it came, 3 even knocks, unhurried. The kind that did not apologize for existing. Maya knew immediately, without needing to check, who it was. She told Sophia to stay at the table. Sophia did not stay at the table. Maya opened the door. Luca stood on the porch. He had not changed out of the clothes he'd worn to the diner that morning, but he was carrying a brown paper bag from which came a smell that was unmistakably, specifically Italian, garlic and herbs, and something with cream that had no business being in Clover Falls. There's a place, he said, by way of greeting, 40 minutes from here. They make decent food. He held up the bag, slightly. I thought you might not want to cook. Maya looked at him standing on her porch. This man who moved through boardrooms and spoke to lieutenants and had a file in federal databases, holding a takeout bag like an offering. She stepped back to let him in. She did not get the chance, because Sophia appeared at her hip like a small, determined satellite and looked directly up at Luca with an expression of pure, scientific interest. Luca, to his credit, did not react with the mild panic that most adults showed when confronted with a child who had decided to engage them without warning. He looked back at her with equal gravity. Hi, said Sophia. Hello, said Luca. A pause. Sophia tilted her head. Are you the man from the black car? Yes. Are you dangerous? Maya's breath caught. She did not intervene. She had learned, with Sophia, that intervening in a question like this produced worse outcomes than letting it land. Luca crouched down slowly, all the way to her eye level, which required genuine effort for a man of his height, and looked at Sophia directly. Sometimes, he said. Not to you. Sophia processed this for 3 full seconds. Then, did you bring dessert? Something crossed Luca's face that Maya had never seen there before. It was not the almost smile from the diner, not the guarded warmth she had started to recognize. It was something altogether less defended than that, brief and unguarded and real in the way only genuinely unexpected moments can be real.
I did, he said.
Okay, said Sophia, and stepped back to let him in herself, which settled the question of whether Luca Ferrante was coming inside Maya's house for the first time. They ate at the kitchen table. Luca sat across from Sophia, who explained to him at considerable length the correct way to determine whether a habitat was terrestrial or aquatic, and the problems with Marcus's lunch situation, and her current position on dogs versus hamsters versus lizards as pets. Luca listened to all of it with the same focused attention he brought to every other conversation Maya had observed him in, except that with Sophia, it was not measured or strategic. He was simply genuinely listening. Maya watched from her side of the table and felt the thing she had not been ready to name 3 hours ago rearrange itself into something larger. She still was not going to name it, but it was there, solid and specific, and she could not have looked away from it if she tried. The woman came in on a Friday morning, between the breakfast rush and the early lunch crowd, when the diner was at its quietest and Maya was doing the stock count at the end of the counter. She was not from Clover Falls. Maya knew this the way she knew all things about her regulars and her not-regulars by the quality of attention the woman paid to the room when she walked in. Locals looked at familiar things without seeing them. This woman looked at everything and catalogued it, efficiently, and without appearing to. She sat at the counter. She wore dark trousers and a cream blouse and the kind of shoes that had not been purchased within 100 miles of this town. Her dark hair was cut to her jaw. She had Luca's eyes, the same near-black steadiness, the same habit of landing on a thing and staying there. Espresso, she said, when Maya came over. Then she looked at the single-serve machine behind the counter with an expression so controlled it was almost diplomatic, and said nothing further about it. Maya made the closest approximation the diner could offer and set it down. Elena Ferrante, the woman said, wrapping both hands around the small cup. Luca's sister. Maya had been expecting many things from Luca's world. A sister had not been among them. She did not let this show. Maya Reeves, she said. I know who you are. Elena's voice was even, not cold, not warm, just precise. He talks about you. Does he? He doesn't talk about anyone. That's the point. Maya leaned against the counter and gave Elena her full attention, because something in the woman's manner suggested she had not driven to Clover Falls to be half listened to. Elena looked at her steadily. I want to understand what is happening here. Not threaten you. That's not why I came. I want to understand. What specifically? My brother has not stayed in one place longer than 3 weeks in 4 years. He moves. It is. She paused, with the particular pause of someone selecting truth over convenience. It is how he has managed since our father died. He keeps moving because stopping means the grief catches up with him. He built a version of his life where forward motion is the same thing as functioning. She set down the espresso cup. He has been in this town for nearly 2 weeks. He has not mentioned leaving. Maya was quiet for a moment. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. The fluorescent light above the far booth flickered once, the way it always did at this hour. I didn't know about his father, Maya said. He doesn't tell people. It's easier, in his world, to be someone who doesn't have losses. Elena looked at her. What did you do? What do you mean? To make him stay. What did you do? Maya thought about it honestly. I hung up on him, she said. And then I told him I wasn't afraid of him. And then I told him that if he was going to sit at my table every morning, he was going to have to tell me the truth about why. Elena looked at her for a long moment. That's all. That's all. People don't do that. Not to him. I noticed. Another silence. Elena picked up her espresso, looked at it, set it down without drinking. Maya had the impression she wasn't particularly interested in the coffee, that the cup was something to do with her hands while she did the actual work of the conversation. He is not an easy person, Elena said at last. He is controlled to the point of remoteness, and he does not ask for help, and he will not tell you when something is wrong until it has been wrong for a very long time. She looked up. You should know that. I'd already worked most of that out, Maya said. The corner of Elena's mouth moved. It was the same motion as Luca's almost smile, the family resemblance startling in its precision. I believe you, she said. She stood, straightened her blouse, and picked up her bag. She left a folded bill on the counter that was significantly more than the cost of a single espresso and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. Turned back. Whatever you're doing, she said, keep doing it. Then she was gone, out the door and into the gray morning, leaving behind an unfinished espresso and the particular silence of a room in which something important has just been said. Maya stood at the counter alone. She thought about a man who had been moving for 4 years because stopping hurt too much. She thought about the corner table and the black coffee and the stillness of someone who had learned to perform stillness because the alternative was feeling the full weight of what he carried. She thought about the way Luca had looked at Sophia last night, that brief, unguarded realness, and understood, now, what it cost him to let that through. She picked up the espresso cup and poured the rest of it down the sink. Then she went back to work, carrying something new and careful in her chest, like something she did not want to put down too quickly in case it broke. Elena just changed everything. Drop a black heart if this chapter hit you. Subscribe to Stories by Niksy. The best chapters are still ahead. The lunch rush on Thursday was at full height when the man came in. Maya noticed him immediately, not because he was obviously dangerous, which was almost the problem, but because he was so deliberately ordinary. The jacket was slightly too good. The shoes were slightly too clean. He sat at the counter with the ease of someone who had sat at many counters in many towns and knew exactly how to look like he belonged to all of them. He ordered coffee and the daily special, and he was polite about it. Genuinely, carefully polite. The kind of polite that is a tool. Maya brought the coffee. He smiled at her the way people smile, when the smile is meant to communicate something other than warmth. Long shift, he asked. Most of them are. She set down the cup. You work here every day? Most days. She had said these same words to the men in the SUV 8 days ago. Her body remembered the conversation, even as she kept her face neutral. Nice little town, he said. Quiet. We like it that way. He picked up the coffee cup and held it with both hands, and looked at her over the rim with pale eyes that were doing something entirely different from what his voice was doing. I imagine you do. A woman like you, a daughter, a good job, a quiet street. That's worth protecting. The diner noise continued around them. The clatter of cutlery, Gary's radio from the kitchen, the retired men in the back debating something loudly. Maya heard all of it and none of it. She looked at the man at her counter and understood, with complete clarity, who he was. I'm Marco, he said, as if she had asked. I have some business in the area. With a mutual acquaintance. He set the cup down. I just wanted to come and see what the fuss was about. He said it pleasantly, like a compliment, like a threat dressed in compliment's clothes. I think you should know that whatever is happening, whatever your mutual acquaintance has told you, it is a situation that is going to resolve itself. One way or another. He smiled again. You and your daughter don't need to be part of that resolution. Maya stood very still. She thought about fear, where it lived in her body, how it announced itself. It was there. She would not pretend otherwise, not even to herself. But it was below the surface, held under by something that had been building in her since the week Luca Ferrante first sat down at her corner table, and that something was the simple, stubborn knowledge that she had set the terms of this situation, and she was not about to let a polite man with clean shoes redraw them. Can I get you anything else? She said. He blinked. Just slightly. As if the response was not the one the calculation had produced. No, he said. I think I have what I need. Great, Maya said. I'll be right back with your check. She walked behind the counter. Her right hand moved to her apron pocket, found her phone, And without looking down, without changing her expression, without any visible motion that was different from reaching for a pen, she opened her messages and typed one word to Luca.
Now.
She put the phone away, poured a coffee for table 6, delivered it, came back, cleaned a section of counter that was already clean. 8 minutes later the bell above the door rang. The diner did not go quiet the way it had on the first day Luca walked in. The regulars knew him now, knew his table, knew his order, knew that his arrivals were unremarkable. But something shifted anyway, the way air shifts when pressure changes before a storm. Luca walked in, and his eyes went to the counter first. Found Maya. She held his gaze for 1 second and moved it very slightly to her left, toward the man still sitting with his untouched special and his careful smile. Luca's pace did not change. He walked to the counter and sat down 2 stools away from Marco Tesoro and ordered black coffee, which Maya poured immediately, her hands entirely steady. Marco looked at Luca. Luca looked back. Neither of them said a word. Maya set down the coffee and moved to the other end of the counter and did not watch, but she felt it, the way you feel a frequency your ears can't quite catch. Whatever passed between the 2 men in that silence was a complete conversation. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end that was not ambiguous. Marco stood. He left a 20 on the counter. He did not touch his food. He walked to the door without looking at Maya, without looking at anything except the exit, and he pushed through it and was gone. Maya heard the SUV start, heard it pull out of the lot, watched it through the front window until it turned off the main street and disappeared. She was still holding the coffee pot. She set it down. Her hands shook. Once, briefly, a single fine tremor that started in her fingers and ran up to her wrists and then stopped, as if it had said what it needed to say and was finished. She pressed both palms flat against the counter. In 11 years of hard things, of leaving, of starting over, of building a life by herself in a town that had not known her name, her hands had never shaken in public. She was aware of Danny before she heard her. The coffee pot lifted from the counter beside her right hand. Danny set it on the burner without a word, without a look, without any of the questions that Maya could feel waiting patiently behind her best friend's eyes. Just the coffee pot moved. Just hands steadied. Maya breathed. At the other end of the counter, Luca sat with his black coffee and did not look at her, giving her, she understood, the privacy of the moment. The room to be human in without an audience. She was going to remember that. Later, when she had herself back together. For now, she breathed, and the diner kept moving, and the clock above the kitchen window ticked forward, and Clover Falls went on being the kind of town where everyone was fine and no one ever needed to know otherwise. Sunday came in quietly. The diner was slow on Sunday mornings, a different kind of full than the weekday rush. Sunday customers sat longer, talked more, wanted their coffee refilled without being asked and their space respected without being ignored. It was Maya's favorite shift of the week for exactly that reason. Sunday required a different rhythm. Unhurried. Present. She had been thinking about the word present a lot lately. Luca arrived at 9:12. Later than usual, which she noticed. He was wearing a dark gray sweater instead of the jacket, the first time she had seen him in anything other than charcoal and black, and it was such a small thing that she felt faintly ridiculous for noticing it. He looked like himself. He also looked, in some ways she did not immediately have language for, like a slightly less armored version of himself. She poured his coffee before he asked. He said, "Thank you." She said, "You're welcome." And then she did something she had not consciously planned. She took off her apron, poured herself a cup, and sat down across from him in the corner booth. The diner was quiet enough. Danny was handling the floor. Gary had the kitchen. The retired men in the back had not yet arrived to begin their weekly argument. There was nothing pressing. There was no threat at the door. There was no agenda sitting between them on the table like an uninvited guest. Just 2 people and 2 cups of coffee, and the particular Sunday light that came through the diner windows, softer than weekday light, slower, the kind that did not demand anything of you. "Elena came to see me," Maya said. He looked at her. Something moved through his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like the feeling of waiting for a thing that has now arrived. "I know," he said. "She told me." "She told you she came?" Elena tells me everything she thinks I need to know. And a number of things I don't.
He paused.
What did she say to you? She told me you've been moving for 4 years. Since your father died. Maya held her coffee cup with both hands. She didn't say it unkindly. She just said it. Luca was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window at the empty Sunday street, the closed hardware store, the bakery with its lights just coming on, the maple tree at the corner whose leaves had started turning at the edges. My father, he said, and then stopped. Rebuilt the sentence. He was not a good man in the ways that count publicly. He built things I inherited that I am still dismantling in certain respects. Another pause. But he was present.
To us.
To Elena, and to me. When he died he turned the coffee cup in his hands. It left a size of space I did not know how to account for. So I kept moving. If you move fast enough, the space can't settle around you. Maya listened without filling the silence with anything. She had learned, in 6 weeks of Luca Ferrante, that the spaces in his sentences were not invitations. They were him, deciding whether to keep going. If you waited without pressure, he usually did.
He did.
And then I called a diner in a town I had never been to, he said, and a woman hung up on me. And I could not explain, to myself or to anyone else, why that mattered. But I drove here, and I sat at that table. He looked at the corner table, his table, and then back at her. And I have not wanted to move since. Maya looked at him. She thought about all the words she had for what she felt, the ones she had been rotating through, rejecting, picking up again, setting down. None of them were quite right. Or rather, one of them was exactly right, and it was not the kind of word you said on a Sunday morning in a diner when the thing between you is still new enough to be breakable. But she knew it. She had known it for a while, if she was honest. Somewhere around the night her hands had shaken and Danny had taken the coffee pot, and Luca had sat quietly at the other end of the counter giving her the privacy to be human. Somewhere around that moment, the last of the resistance had stopped being resistance and become something else entirely. She was not going to say it yet. But she knew it. I'm glad you drove here, she said instead. Simple and true. He looked at her with that look, the one she had been cataloging since week 1. She had watched it move over 6 weeks from calculating to curious to something that had no tactical function whatsoever. It was unguarded in a way she doubted many people had ever seen it. So am I, he said. He left 20 minutes later. He had a call, he said, some business that could not be moved. He stood from the booth, put on his jacket and walked to the door. At the threshold, he stopped. Turned back. He looked at her from across the diner, past the booths and the Sunday customers and the fluorescent flicker above table 9 that Earl had still not fixed, and said nothing. She looked back and said nothing. It was the most complete thing that had passed between them since the beginning. Then he pushed open the door and walked to the black car and got in and was gone, and the diner bell settled into silence behind him. Maya sat in the corner booth with her cooling coffee and her hands wrapped around the cup and felt the words she knew but had not said sitting warm in her chest, solid and specific and entirely hers. Not yet, she told it.
Give it a little more time.
She was smiling at her coffee when Danny slid into the seat across from her without invitation and put both elbows on the table and her chin in her hands and looked at Maya with an expression of absolute, barely contained delight. Don't, Maya said. I didn't say anything. You were about to say several things. I was about to say, Danny said carefully, that I saw the way he looked at you before he left. And I just want it noted for the record that I saw it. Officially. I am a witness. Noted, Maya said. Officially dismissed. Absolutely not, Danny said. I will be bringing this up on a weekly basis until you admit what is happening. Maya picked up her coffee. Get back to work, Danny. Danny stood, grinning, and went back to the floor. Maya sat alone in the corner booth, Luca's booth. She had started thinking of it, which was a problem she was choosing not to examine too closely today, and let the Sunday morning settle around her like something warm. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. She had been ready for it since the moment she hung up the phone. She knows what she feels. She just won't say it yet. Follow Stories by Niksy for next, where everything finally gets said. Comment Sunday morning if you want the next chapter.